Hello and welcome to the Game Dev Local Podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Clark, he, him, and I am on a podquest to learn everything you wanted to know about game dev but never dared to ask. And today I am delighted to be joined by Huw Millward. Huw, tell us about yourself and what you do.
Hi, mate. So I'm Huw Millward. I'm the developer of a game called Warsim and the founder of a company called World Viper Studios, which is now working on a new project, which is quite exciting. But yeah.
All good stuff. I mean, like an indie dev. So, what world are we talking about? Are we talking about PC, mobile? We're talking about Switch, itch. I mean, there's so many different areas where people build content. Where did Warsim kick off?
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, originally it began as a project to sort of learn how to code, and that was PC only. It still is, to be fair. We have tried a few mobile attempts, but yeah, it survived for a long time now, actually, on PC only income, which as an indie dev, making a game that runs out Windows CMD is a bizarre thing for 2025 to be my full-time job. But I won't question it. If people are happy enough to continue buying it,
But it's interesting because this is the thing that whatever indie dream means, and obviously there's a whole bunch of spectrums of that kind of process. But a lot of us make games because you cut us, we bleed game. I mean, and there's a difference between people who are kind of compelled to make something as opposed to just enjoying playing. I feel lucky that I can be both a game maker and a game player. Not everybody can do that. And actually, the irony in many ways is that I have literally no actual practical skills in making games. I just know everything about how to make them. That sounds arrogant. Hopefully you know where I'm coming from with that.
I know, I totally get you.
You're starting out. Good. You're starting out. You're making. You're learning how to make a game, and you choose to make something that's relatively simple. What was the driving force? What was the most creative process that led to Warsim?
Well, it's even weirder than that, really. It was like I learned basic C++ because I thought I was going to be a big hacker back in the day. I thought I'd take down the banks, take down all the big horrible corporations. That didn't work. But I learned some very basic C++, and through that, followed a basic little YouTube tutorial.
Yeah.
Wasn't really thinking about it. I didn't think I'd make any games, to be honest. I was trying to just make something move. Do you know what I mean? And make something exist. Wow, this is so cool. It's like that spark of seeing light come on when you put two wires together. It was kind of that, and there was no intent that there was going to be a game coming out of it. And yeah, it was kind of a weird one. Like, I worked on Warsim a tiny bit just to learn to code, just a basic little battle simulator.
Yeah.
And after a little while, I was like, okay, started working on some proc gen systems, and they were cool, but they weren't really being used anywhere. I started thinking, fuck, I really want to see it used in a project, but I can't make those projects because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
In the end, I ended up working on something new, which was called The Wastes, which was another little micro game project. And that ballooned. And within 6 months, I had a community of a couple of hundred people who were sending me like donations and stuff. And I was working in the hotel. I was writing code on napkins. I was really excited about it. And very new, very young. I think I might have even been like 19 at the time. I had no idea what I was doing. And I came home one day to carry on working on this Wastes post-apocalyptic sort of fantasy game. And as I was typing, the screen crashed. And when I reopened it, the code was gone. It had been wiped. And I didn't have a backup because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I know, literally. So my heart was ripped out. I felt like my journey into the games industry was robbed from me. And I was like, oh God, what do I do now? And
so no one had showed you things like Git.
No. So I just.
So no one had showed you things like Git.
Yeah, sadly. But after that, I was a bit disheartened and decided, well, what am I going to do? So I looked at that old War Simulator project that I had, and thought, well, screw it, let's have a little look at what we got. And I added a little thing like an arena and a few other little side features. And it was a way for me to express myself and still sort of do some game deving. And after about a year, it started to really resemble a bit of a game by then. And I put it on itch.io and people started sending me money for it. And then, the rest is history. Really. I think 2017, I decided to take a little punt and put it on Steam, which cost me £100, which I thought, am I going to see that back? And now it's made over 500,000. So it's an absolutely insane journey, really. But it was totally by accident. Wasn't making it really to even
that's a
make a game.
Huge journey.
It's been wild.
And again, this is the kind of opportunity that I think game making really kind of offers, is that the act of creative process is valuable in itself. You've got the survivor story. We know that like 1 in 300 games breaks even. This is that finger in the air kind of guesstimate. It's not an actual number, but it kind of shows the odds which you're up against. And yet you've managed to get a game up on Steam that has been commercial. Um, what do you think is kind of like, 'cause, I mean, what most people are going to try and do, and I'm going to try not to do this, but
Hmm.
most people try to go, oh, what lessons can we learn from what you did? Because I suspect that your success has come from a zeitgeist moment where you've done something which happened to catch fire. I think it's really hard to replicate those things. But what I find interesting is that often when you look at those kind of experiences, the authenticity behind the people making it is what provides the fuel. Does that make sense?
No, totally, and I appreciate that. Well, I think it's an interesting thing because when I first started, and I think this maybe is a weird privilege I had because I wasn't doing it to make profit or to make something commercial, um,
Mm,
but that like
mm,
it wasn't successful when it released, and it wasn't successful in 2017. It wasn't really
mm.
successful in 2018, but it made a couple of £100 every few months. I was happy with that because I didn't think I'd be a game dev,
Yeah.
and it was only by late 2018 that I started noticing on the back end of Steam that that video that went out would cause a spike, or that that YouTube video that was
Yeah.
happening, or the stream, or an article that went live would cause these little spikes. And I realized those were actually something that, if I were able to keep that consistent, would be enough to craft a living on it. And I started taking marketing more seriously. I think it was maybe
Yeah.
2018, 2019 that it started really picking up. And then pandemic era was kind of a bit of the golden age for
Mm.
me. And obviously, you've got a lot of people online, which I think maybe is the zeitgeist, right? You've got a lot of people trapped, captive audience, and I was just marketing it as much as I could. But I feel
Yeah.
like if I hadn't done any of that, no one would have heard of it. So I think people who are maybe making a
No.
game, they spent 2-3 years and it didn't get any success or sales. They might go, oh, it's a failure and give up. But I guess the space I had to be able to just freely continue to add to it made it something that ended up being greater than the sum of its parts and all those time put into it, and obviously marketing then on the side.
No, I totally get that. Yeah, I totally get it. I think what I find fascinating though is that quite often people will have a success and they will ignore what they've done and not call it marketing. So you talk about putting out videos. People will put out videos and they don't think that is actually a communication exercise. That is actually marketing.
Absolutely.
Now packaging that and making that appealing, that's a complicated process. But you clearly have understood that communicating that game's value to people matters, and the vector you were doing, you seem to have been doing that through video. What other techniques, what other kind of processes do you think helped that journey?
As in, like, help with the marketing, or getting it out there in general, or...
Well, I was thinking in terms of like how you decide what um content you're doing, what video you're doing, what updates you're doing, what kind of like how are you getting that feedback from players to decide what to do next, or are you just deciding this is what I feel like doing?
You know what? Yeah, it's the latter. It was total chaos for a long time. Actually, I think maybe a bit indulgent, but I would just wake up and whatever I felt like I wanted to do, I'd do it. And if I saw a fan comment and they'd say, "Hey, it'd be really cool if you could get drunk," and I go, "Do you know what? That really is a good idea." And then I spent 3 weeks building 40 bars in all these different regions of the world and adding drunk systems and drinking competitions and stupid stuff. And by the end of the week, I'd be like, "That was wicked." And I've still got a few loose ends I need to close. So it took me
Yeah.
until I think 2022 to go, okay, it's out of early access now. And all of those half-done things are closed because I spent so long ignoring the things that I was like, that's not fresh anymore. It's not fun anymore. But this new random little side feature is. So I'd spend so much time just adding all this crap everywhere, which now has made it this mad game that's full of so much weird stuff. But at the time, obviously, there was loose ends that were open that meant it couldn't come out of early access. But it was very, very indulgent and very, very fan servicey, I
But I
guess.
think, yeah, I mean, but fan service is okay because if I understand the game correctly, we're basically chucking hypotheses like stupid. It's almost like a global version of who wins, bear or shark, in my head. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit unfair, but maybe I'm limiting the scope of it a little bit. But there's something about these hypotheticals that are provoked by those drunken conversations. Or, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying you got to get drunk to enjoy that kind of stuff. I just mean that there's that kind of social kind of glue that those conversations come out of. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Mm. And I mean, so in terms of like how you then build on that. So you've got this thing that's going out. You're sustaining it, and you're finding suddenly you're getting an income from that. How does that affect you as a developer? How does that change the way you look at the process?
Yeah, it's interesting, really. It's sort of, it doesn't, in a weird way sometimes. You can really like keep that mask on where you feel like you're not an indie developer, you're just a person that happens to be coding, and some people are messaging you and commenting, but you're not a game developer. It just never occurred to me. And there was a point where it sort of does become a bit of a job, and there is that risk of, obviously, something that becomes a job loses its spark. But it didn't, amazingly. I'm still getting fan messages and emails
Yeah.
almost every day, and it blows my mind. It always humbles me. It makes me feel really proud, to be honest. But yeah, I went to a talk a little while ago, and I saw someone talking about how their two games on Steam in lifetime made under $1,000. And I think that was when I was like, holy shit. And I had a
Yeah.
month where I made just about $1,000, and I was like, fuck, this is a bad month. And it was like, oh my god, this person was celebrating the fact that they'd made just about that in a lifetime between two video games, and I'm there moping about the fact that I only made that 1 month, because I'm so used to it now being like my income, and being good. And I think that really put it into my head, like, okay, no, this is real, this is legitimate, this is a job. And that was quite recent. We're talking more than 10 years of working on this. So I guess it doesn't always necessarily feel real. It doesn't necessarily feel legitimate because of where it comes from. You don't necessarily lose where you started. It's an interesting one.
No, I get you. I get you. I mean, I feel this myself. I mean, or I used to.
Yeah.
So back in the day, I tried. I pitched my first game idea in 1987.
Oh wow.
And I got told, great idea, come back when you made it. Of course, I didn't have any money or anything like that, so I had to go get a job and go to college. And which I should. I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
But I trained as a marketing person.
Okay.
And I spent 10 years basically doing IT marketing when I was spending my spare time writing tabletop board games and things like that. And it was
Skills to have.
only when I took my tabletop to a marketing job. Well, yeah, I mean, it's what it's what I was. It's what I do. It's how I feel about the things. It's something about making game mechanics I just adore. And I ended up getting a job with Wireplay, the online service that BT had at the time. Because I could demonstrate I was a proper game person. Because look, I made this thing, and even then, even though my jobs were basically kind of planning and strategizing how to make game services operate, I was
Yeah.
still basically doing software design for games people. And it wasn't really until I got to PlayStation when I suddenly kind of felt I could call myself a designer, because I was sat with other legitimate game designers planning out what PlayStation Home should or could be, working with various other people to make that happen, and realizing that it was exactly the same skills. And it's very hard. I mean, to be honest, I even felt a bit sort of like nervous about that. And even later, even though I'd spent years basically helping other people do game designs, video game and computer and board game designs for years and years and years and years. That is a. I mean, I don't think people talk about this as imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I don't think that's my experience of it. I don't think I felt like an imposter.
Mm.
I didn't think I had the qualifications. So
Okay.
that's subtly different way of thinking,
Yeah.
which is I thought there was something so that other people could describe themselves as. I didn't think I was pretending to be a designer. I didn't think I'd qualified to be a designer. And then the realization that I'd been qualified to be a designer snuck up on me. Does that make any sense?
No, totally. I totally see what you're saying. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I suppose everyone's got their own sort of journey, haven't they, with it? But I think it is quite a common experience in some capacity.
Yeah.
This, especially with our sort of field.
And especially because there's so much expectation wrapped up with, at one extreme you've got the kind of the divas of the games industry, the kind of the mavens who seemingly conjure games from nothing, or at least the PR says that they do. But we all know reality is games are made by teams, not by individuals. Except here is an example. You're an example of somebody who managed to actually make a game. But
from scratch as well.
When people think about that from scratch, yeah. But it's still a rarity. I mean, Balatro is another example, but I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people who love to have that success too. But where I'm coming from is, we often aspire to being these individual things, but I think there's a balance. Do you think that you found it more challenging because you were doing it yourself, or was that kind of for you the point of what you were trying to make?
Do you know what? For a start, I'll say I did make it solo, but I had thousands of people that shared their passions for it and shared their ideas and stuff. So it's a solo effort in that I sort of did the work in a way, but there was it wasn't just one mind on it, if you know what I mean. But I feel like it's a weird curse because
Totally.
now I've got a studio, right, and now I have staff, and having people that I can assign work to, and it just gets done, and I don't have to I don't have to do that is mind blowing to the solo dev mind. You know, it's such a powerful skill, but at the same time, not having the ability to be the one doing everything at all times, you almost lose a little bit of the ability to have that complete vision. You know what I mean? And the complete control and vision that a solo dev does have, where I could pull an all nighter, go and do a podcast.
Yeah, it's like wearing.
Literally wear all the hats, but you know what you're thinking in all of them. You know, where you have to start assigning the hats out. You got to have the meetings. Then you've got to bring it, keep it all on track, and that brings different challenges. And I think it's also a superpower, obviously, having a team. But there's some real benefits to solo dev where you do just have that vision and control completely in your head. That it's powerful, isn't it? So I've definitely found a dichotomy really between the two.
No, totally. I mean, so metaphor I use is like thinking about it like having to wear a pair of gloves one size bigger, where you've kind of lost that kind of sensitivity to kind of the control on your. And I know for me personally, I find myself, I get, I feel I have to step in rather than step back. And the worst thing you can do when you've got a team is to not let them get on with their job. Does that make sense?
Definitely, that's a really good metaphor actually as well. Yeah, because obviously you're taking up a bigger space, aren't you? The gloves are bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think you can't hover over everyone at all times, can you? You definitely have to have some faith in the skill that you've acquired and hope that these people are going to be able to deliver what they're delivering, and you build a better team that way, I think.
No, exactly. And I think one of the things that it's very easy for people, because I think one of the issues that we have in the industry anyway is we're very good at kind of putting people into managerial functions who don't necessarily have an interest in being managers. And it's inevitable if you're making your own team that you're going to have to take on a managerial function, and that is a skill in its own right. And I think when you've got people who often come from ego, and you clearly aren't one of those people from everything we've said today, you often have people who find it difficult to surrender. To surrender that power. Do you? I mean, don't get me wrong. I have trouble with surrendering power too, and I like to think I'm not one of those people too. But do you feel that challenge to pass it to somebody else and just trust that they'll do it?
Definitely, yeah. No, it's a learned thing that I'm having to learn. Obviously, spending 10 years being a solo dev and learning now to be like, oh, this isn't my job. This is someone else's, and I have to have faith that they're going to deliver it. But I think, luckily, it's one of those things that proves itself. The more these people that you're working with are able to deliver what they're supposed to do, and as you see everything improving, you can't deny it. And ultimately, it sort of fixes that in you really, because you're seeing the results of it. And as long as you're leading with compassion, you're looking after each other. You're working to build something together rather than you're building it for me sort of thing. I think you end up with a better way of doing things, really, a better project.
Yeah.
So
no, that's exactly the language I love to hear. And when we've been doing accelerator stuff, one thing I try and kind of instill in people is that the term company should be a group of people on a collective endeavor. If we're not on a collective endeavor, and don't get me wrong, we don't all have the same level of risks associated with it, and the founder has the greater burden, but that's also a greater responsibility. And part of that responsibility is to empower our teams, because we hire people for their skills, don't we? And therefore we want them to feel they can use their skills. And if we take that power away from them, why are we getting in our own? Sorry, you get my drift. What's the point?
Yeah. No, I totally get it.
So, with that in mind, so you've now got a team, and you're working on a different project. My brain has gone. Slumbox. That's it. World Viper's the team, and I knew that was wrong, but Slumbox. So transitioning from the solo project where you've managed to hit a zeitgeist, what was the elements that you decided to bring out to deliver the next game? How did you decide on the next game?
Well, I think I've been mulling with these ideas for a while. So I ended up on Warsim as a game. It ultimately became something I want to play anyway, and I just added so many things that were things I wanted to do. But I love RPGs. I really love RPGs. And what I was building with Warsim was a kingdom management game, which had RPG elements for sure. But I think I've always loved RPGs so much, and I've wanted for years to build my own RPG. So this is all the ideas that have been floating around in the head for a decade and beyond, really, being filtered into something. And I think the real push I had was a friend of mine had been working indie, working in a studio. He's done every side of the industry you can imagine, and he went back to indie, having gone to work for a AAA company, and felt a bit disenfranchised by it for the stuff that you read about all the time. You know, the classic burnout, churn, disrespect for people at a lower level. And he ended up creating something that made him obscenely rich. And I thought, what am I doing with myself? You know, working on this solo project that has arguably a low ceiling, with it being, you know, a fucking text-based game running out of Windows CMD, English only, PC only, 2025. Don't get me wrong, still beautiful, and I'm able to make a living out of it. But I thought I need to really start thinking about the next step and what comes after this, because I can't live on this forever. And so I took the decision maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, after seeing a talk in Cardiff, actually in Wales, about games industry stuff and how companies would form and things like that, and thought, you know, maybe I need to do that. Maybe I need to found my own company and start making some real moves. And now we're nearly 2 years into it now, and it's been a fascinating journey. But yeah, it was sort of driven by a bit of a what's next, you know, a bit of a, am I going to just keep squeezing the Warsim teat, you know, forever?
Yeah. Because there's an interesting thing, because there is a for those who know me, I'm obsessed with live ops experiences. But I think some people misunderstand that. It's not just because I'm interested in the money, because obviously live ops can be more successful.
Of course.
It's more that I get fed up when I play in a world and it ends. And I know that's sort of silly in some ways, but as a designer, when I play something like The Outer Worlds 2, right, which I adored, there are so many spaces in that world where you could schedule new NPCs with new missions and new stories that could be really entertaining. You could create seasonal experiences that feel more like a soap opera, but instead we've got a linear narrative. Now, that's not me saying that they've done a bad job at all. It's just me saying, oh my goodness, I can see this long world of opportunities to continue to live and breathe into a space that I really enjoyed playing in. And something like Warsim, it doesn't quite have the same kind of narrative scope in the same way, but it does have that replayability. It does have that kind of like what if, and I could see how you can create, and like you already found, people wanting more things, you adding those more things, you adding that experience and getting that response from players. It is absolutely something I can see you continuing doing for long periods of time. But there comes a point where, as creators, we want to have other outlets, and I think that's where the tension. I mean, does that make sense to you? Does that where the tension lies?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm on the same page as you, really, with regards to that. You know, when I see a beautiful game that I feel like has such a fantastic foundation, that it's like they built something that was, you know, enough for a couple of hours worth of play, and then, you know, fucked off to the next thing. It's like, but there's so much here that you could build on top of. So I totally get that. And I think it's one of the things that drives me as a game dev. So with Slumbox, I think I'll probably end up, in truth, in a similar situation where hopefully the money we get from the release will mandate the ability to put a team on it for a lot longer, you know, and actually have a long tail of support for it. You know, not with any subscription or anything like that, but, you know, it's definitely something that drives me as well.
Oh, and I'll happily tell you all the tricks and tips about how to do that down the line. I mean, things like scheduling things, using servers. I'm a big believer in smart use of tech to be able to manage things in more sustainable ways. But what I think is really kind of different about the way you approach things and interesting is you do seem to capture something about simplicity in terms of the interfaces and the experience. And the reason I think that matters today is Roblox. And I'm not saying your stuff looks like Roblox at all. Far from it. Far from it. But what I think Roblox highlights to people is massive concentration on visual fidelity, like a traditional AAA, does not necessarily shift the needle. Focus on gameplay does. Does that make sense? I mean, is my observation right
No,
on
I
that?
fully agree. I mean, I think Roblox is a freak of nature at the moment, isn't it? For
Yeah,
better or worse. But seeing, it's a rejection, isn't it, of that, like you say, the graphical fidelity situation. And I
yeah,
think, yeah, I mean, you can't spell gameplay without game. And I think so many studios, as you say, we get 15 years between every sequel now, and
yeah.
they're not even better. They just look better, and it's like, well, that's great, cool. I can see the shadow on his asshole, but like the game sucks, and it's just like, that's the problem.
I
The
love the way
focus
you
is so much on
describe
it. We've
that.
got to make it
Yeah,
look blockbuster.
yeah.
But
But
they're just substanceless, aren't they? So
yeah,
that's where I'm fully with you.
I think that you've nailed it there. It's art can make an absolute difference to the experience. I mean, the God of War games, there's something about
Oh,
just
for
the
sure.
beautiful context. I mean, even I know Skyrim looks a bit poop now, but I remember the first time I was walking across the mountains, picking flowers, and in a glorious sunset. And I know in the scheme of things today it was rubbish, but now is not how it felt then. It felt incredible to
I
have
agree.
something that visually stunning at the time. But now when I look across, I don't know, Horizon Zero Dawn or a God of War or those kind of epic art rich experiences, I am absolutely thrilled. But equally, I can see these charming, beautiful moments, even things like, well, I mean, there are so many examples. I'm not going to kind of bore people with my personal taste on games, but when you see games that get the right balance between artistic fidelity, which serves gameplay, as opposed
Hmm.
to when you spend time making it look pretty because you can. Is that making sense?
No, definitely, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's room for beautiful games, and I
Yeah,
think, as you say, some games that find that beautiful stylized art style that is very them can define whole genres, can't they? And
yeah.
it is fantastic to see.
Well,
But yeah, no, I think
Journey
similarly,
being
it can be a roadblock, can't it?
yeah. Well, I was thinking Journey as an example. It exactly did what you're describing, where it became possible to think about doing short form gameplay if you were taking a visual art style that was going to take the player to a hugely deep level. I'd even argue the first third of Stray profoundly changed the way I think about UX because Stray is a beautiful experience, but that first third, before they bring in the technology, you're actually playing a cat. You're actively playing as a cat. And I think that the way they pull that off, I almost wish they hadn't added the other stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, brilliant game, love it. But I almost wish they hadn't felt the need to bring in other mechanisms because there was something magical about the completely intuitive way that I could explore the world. So obviously I gave you an example. There are lots of examples. We talked about Stray, we talked about Journey. What I think is really interesting though is that you're focusing on experiences that allow people to feel like they're connected. I mean, with Slumbox, you're choosing to not have rules and goals in your game style. I mean, I'm just reading your gameplay kind of bullets here, but
Yeah.
there's a consequence. Bills are due, clock is ticking. You're using, from what I can see, time as the motivator, the direction. Um, you're kind of then presumably people will explore the world and find options for them to choose to get the necessary kind of resources that they need to sustain and potentially progress. How much do you think about defining the game in terms of like the things that we do versus how you give a sense of progression and purpose in the game?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's not a closed chapter for me in design. Obviously, we're quite early into the
Mm,
development now, and there's still a lot to do. So I think there's definitely options for things. And I've been mulling actually, even recently, over the idea of there being some sort of overarching narrative that could happen. But I think I find
mm,
really
mm.
enthrallingly the kind of gameplay where, like games like Kenshi, right, where you'll be playing for an hour, and by the end of that hour, you've gone on such a journey, and you've gone through so many unique experiences, and none of that was scripted. You've just experienced random bits of gameplay, reacted as you do, and it's created your character's story. and your character dies, maybe, you know, and you will always remember, okay, that journey was wild. You play a different character, it's a different journey. So I think trying to create the kind of ecosystem that can react to you and also throw things that you have to react at that in a sort of random and unpredictable way that creates a unique narrative for the player is something I'm really trying to sort of capture again and squeeze as much into that as possible. Yes, it's an interesting one. It's definitely something I'm going to continue workshopping with.
No, I get it, and I love thinking about how these designs operate. For like I say, we've got these. I'm a bit of a sandbox lover, so I love my No Man's Skies. I love my kind of Skyrims of this world where I can go and do anything I like. But within those worlds, there are flows, there are kind of vectors, some of which are user inspired, some of which are game narrative inspired. But I'm also very aware as a design theorist how important progression is, and particularly how you can think about the way that purpose works with progression, works with optimization. One of my favorite moments in games like Fallout 76 is the fact that I have different modes of play that happen to suit my different need states. Like I will go and collect, ammo, resources, food by going off and killing off things that I've already killed off many, many times just to make sure I have the resources. Then I'll go back to my base. I'll do all the crafting and then I'll get totally badass. And then I will go and do the next mission. And those sorts of like rhythms I find instinctively valuable. But then again, part of that's because I'm choosing to play the endless forever games. Whereas if you're playing an Outer Worlds, I'm trying to min max my capacity to solve the next problem. So I tend to get more obsessive about the things that I need to achieve. So these to me are kind of like, it's like framing player experience structures versus choosing audience experiences. And my impression of you so far is you've got an idea of what you want to deliver, but you're really seem very focused on what players will want to experience. Is that right?
Yeah. But I mean, I'm quite fascinated by your explanation of the sort of rhythms of play. I'm gonna remember that. But yeah, no, it's an interesting one.
Don't listen to me. I just talk all sorts of nonsense.
No, I mean you've got some really good insights, mate. I mean, like you say, you've been doing this for a long time. You've got a lot of expertise from different areas, mate. Whether you accept that or not. So I appreciate those nuggets of wisdom.
As I go on endlessly, the new book's coming out in March. So, but yeah, I've spent loads of time trying to think about kind of frameworks and structures. But I think there's something I love about like designers who have had that more instinctive route, which I think is really powerful. And you've clearly had the ability to have enough of an instinct to interpret player behavior to create something which became a cult classic. I mean, obviously, for some people, the scale of your success doesn't necessarily equate to, I don't know, Call of Duty. But to my mind, it's just as important because, to have a one-man band, being able to deliver to such an extent that an audience responds to, that delivers the revenues that you're talking about, that to me is the definition of designer success. Has this opened doors for you? I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to blow smoke here. It's just like, there's a lot of people out there who in the game dev local group that have been slogging away for years, and they've had lots. I've had, my career can be defined by the number of failures as well as the fun, amazingly successful things I've happened to have worked on. But for every success, there's 20 failures. Yeah,
for sure.
I've never felt like any of them being a waste.
No, certainly not. I mean, I mean, the failures teach you a lot of things, don't they? It's an important part of your journey. And I think sometimes if you only ever succeed, you're never going to really learn how to not fail in either, if that makes sense. But
exactly,
get a bit existential there. But yeah, in regards to the opening doors, I feel like, especially lately, it really has been actually. I mean, so I'm in Wales, and we've got a really, really beautiful division of the games industry here, which is called Creative Wales, and they cover the movies, music, games industry, all that sort of stuff. and they're really trying hard to sort of develop and foster a games industry in Wales now. And through them, we've gone to America, we've gone to Helsinki, we've gone all over the place. And yeah, I mean, I've been on an aeroplane and someone sat next to me had bought my game because they'd seen it in Retro Gamer. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, I was talking to him. He was like, no way, I bought that 2 days ago. I bought that. You know, it's incredible the doors that have been opened and the experience that I've had. And you know, that person I spoke to has now become a collaborator and a person I've worked with a lot, and they're a really impressive and creative person. And it's just, you know, there's so many opportunities that have come from it, and I can say what I can say about, you know, what has happened with Warsim, and you know, the proof is in the pudding then, isn't it? So it's definitely opened doors, and it's been remarkable, to be honest. Still have to pinch myself a little bit, I think, sometimes in these situations.
No, and I can attest to the Creative Wales team and what they do for the local industry. We did a bunch of accelerator programs with Creative Wales as part of a thing called Indie Lab, and we obviously work very closely with those folks. And also at the same time, it was being run with Creative Scotland and various other people. Creative Scotland. Anyway, one of the Scottish games focused groups, and you know, a lot of the regional groups are doing a lot of really good work in terms of engaging and supporting. But Wales in particular, because they actually provide direct support, like you say, for Welsh teams, particularly things like Gamescom. You know, having a stand on the floor at Gamescom for Wales specific teams. The UK wide organisation doesn't do that. Now, don't get me wrong, UK do a good job for providing a location within Gamescom,
and they're wicked as well. UK, fair play to them.
And like I say, but it's interesting how Creative Wales have managed to pull off doing even more for the local community. And like you say, there's amazing groups of people, and the Welsh publishing teams and so on and so forth that are out there. So I think this is what actually a lesson I think a lot of teams can take, which is, in fact, I'll ask you a little bit more about it in a second. But my feeling is that, you know, if you happen to be in a region, now I'm unlucky that I'm personally based in the southeast in sunny Aldershot, so I'm right next to Guildford, so there's not a lot of like local support. But this is why the companies that I set up and the teams that we set up tend to be in regions instead. So our team is currently in Scotland. We are based in Edinburgh as a company, and our team are based in Scotland. I say that though, but we're also a Belgian company, and we're because we've got investment from a Belgian investor, and we're setting up another team in Belgium. So there will be teams in Scotland, and there will be teams in Belgium. And that is so that we can work with the facilities that are available, accelerator programs, you know, grant funding, local talent finding, the local mentoring that you can get from those teams. And I think embracing and engaging the public options can be massively important. So turning that to a question, definitely. What experience, you know, you've talked about travel and stuff like that, but how much support do you think you've been able to get from the Welsh team?
I mean, to be fair, I've only recently, in this grand scheme of things, appeared on their radar, so I didn't even think about it. You know, you talk about using the regions in your area and you know, being resourceful in that sense. I didn't even think about it. You know, I didn't even know it existed, to be honest. And I was in my little bubble making games in my bedroom. And it was only maybe a year and a bit, 2 years ago, that I had a little look, went to an event and was like, oh wow, there's loads of people here doing stuff similar to me. And, you know, I was giving talks then. You know, there was stuff I could offer these people and help I could give to other local game devs that were sort of figuring their own journey out and were doing things that, oh, wait, don't do that. No, look, see, there's this over here, stuff like that, you know. And these people are going on the same, I could see totally the same journey I went on that these incredibly talented local game devs were doing as well. And it was awesome to see that. And, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities with Creative Wales and with, you know, the local sort of stuff like that. They've got grants, they've got accelerator programs, things like that. But really, the majority of the stuff I've been doing at the moment has been going on the trade missions, right? So going on essentially an adventure with all the other big games companies from the region. To, as you say, Gamescom was one of the ones that I think they have done in the past. I didn't do that one, but I went to San Francisco for GamesDev or GDC, GameDev Con. And, GDC, and we recently came back from Slush in Helsinki as well. Fantastic. And I think the weird thing is, and this is something that they told me is quite common, but you come back with connections, don't get me wrong, with plenty of connections from people that you meet at these events. But the vast majority of the connection you make is with the people that you go with. So you end up meeting all these fellow developers and companies, and you come back with such a strong bond with the local industry, really, that now they're probably the greatest resource I have as a game dev in Wales, is that I know all the other big company heads and all of the other people in those areas and scenes, and can see all of their talent, their skill, and I have access to their expertise, and they're all invaluable, and almost every single one of them
No,
has been
totally.
helpful to me. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, I think, I think we're lucky in the games industry that most of particularly the indie dev community, are incredibly willing to support each other and connect, and realize
Yeah.
that we're generally not competing. Even if
Hmm.
we have games that are similar genre, similar things, they're typically not things that are going to exclude somebody from playing our game. And I mean,
Yeah.
generally, and I think that is
Yeah.
quite powerful. Particularly, also, I think it's the fact that games are almost like a miracle. They're like the fact that we can pull together art, tech, kind of like marketing, community, narrative, audio, physics, you name it, all psychology, all sorts of things pulled together around a single
It's true.
product with all these different issues. And to my mind, that makes the fact that you were able to make a game on your own from scratch even more astounding,
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it
because
definitely
this
teaches you
is
a lot of things, doesn't it?
non-trivial.
No, no,
Mm,
for sure. It is like a fascinating thing, isn't it? That does contain so much media all in one. I've really thought about that. But I mean, that's
yeah,
probably why the games industry now is bigger than movies and music combined, isn't it? It's just this monster entertainment product that can offer so much more than anything else
yeah.
typically. And that's why
And I
we love them,
think
isn't it?
it's
To be
still the
fair.
case that we're the single. Yeah, I think I'm right in saying we're the single largest form of digital entertainment on the planet. I think TV is bigger, um, which
Is it?
but let's face it, TV is, yeah, TV on its own, a broadcast TV still remains bigger. Home
Hmm.
entertainment, I think during COVID we eclipsed, but I don't know if we still do. But if you think about it, a lot of so, for example, there's more hours watched of video game play on YouTube than sport, I think. I mean, I may misremembered
Really?
it, but it's an
Wow.
enormous, yeah. It's enormous amount of digital use of game content, both playing and watching,
Yeah.
that exists. It's pretty
Hmm.
astounding stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've
That
got,
is.
we can get very excited about this stuff, but you know, we are a very important form of entertainment. But I think what really makes games interesting for me is the fact that we're verbs. We're not nouns. We do games. We don't
Okay.
receive games alone, if that makes sense.
What, like from a player perspective, or
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if you think about it, you when you experience a game, it's through an action. You
right? Yeah, no,
play.
yeah,
You
that's true. Yeah,
choose.
you're feeling the game rather than watching a film. You're not watching a film or listening to music. You're sat idly experiencing
Exactly.
something. But with games,
It's active.
no, that's a very good point.
Yeah, it's active, not
Yeah, no,
passive.
I guess
Yeah.
it's more visceral, then,
Anyway,
isn't it?
so
More real.
much more visceral, exactly. So let's kind of bring it around. So if you've got, obviously, I think you understand that your experience is atypical of game developers starting out. However,
Definitely.
I think what you've demonstrated is that it is still possible to have an outright outlandish success. But I believe you would have done this anyway to learn how to make games. Is that fair?
No, I think totally. I don't know whether I would have gone as long, maybe, if I was getting no feedback from anyone. Because obviously, like
Mm,
in the early days, getting comments was so fueling. Getting people actually commenting and being interested, and it was such a thing that fed me the desire to continue developing this. But yeah, no, I would have developed it for nobody. I would have made it just to play it myself, really, which I guess is an unusual thing in and of itself. Because most people, I mean, if you've got to pay the bills with it,
mm.
that's a different story. And I may have not been able to do this if I had to try and make money out of it that soon. I go, oh, this isn't working. I've got to try something else.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird one, but no, I totally agree.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because there's a certain level of, I mean, I'm going to use the word, I'm never sure it's the best word to describe it, because people don't necessarily appreciate where I'm coming from when I say it, but there is a privilege in having the space to be able to invest your time in something like this. A lot of people who maybe
100%.
don't have the same opportunities just don't have the scope to do it. But the fact that you quote unquote spent that privilege in that time, and but you, what I think seems to be the thing that stands out here is that you relished the feedback and the engagement that you got from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's a good
Is
word
there
for it.
anything that you, yeah, I mean, is there anything in that early period where you think you kind of you saw a pattern or an opportunity or some trigger that led you to get that feedback? Because I know a lot of people make games and they, like you said, that guy made $2,000 ever in their career. They clearly feel like they're probably, I mean, I'm speaking for them, I don't know what they actually feel, but I imagine they feel like they were screaming into the void, getting no response. And that is, I think, a common occurrence. What do you think made the difference between people responding to you when a lot of others might not have had a response?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I pushed really hard to try and get it out to as many people as I could in the early day, and I think I had the benefit that when I started out, it was free. So I wasn't trying to sell anything, you know, I was just trying to get people on board.
Mm-hmm.
But those early click-throughs, those early responses are absolutely hard to come by. And I just tried to engage with everyone that did. And sometimes it'd be one or two people, but I'd always engage with them, you know. And then later on, I'd end up with threads with tens to, you know, dozens and dozens of comments, and I would still reply to them all. I think the biggest we ever had was a post on Reddit that went really viral, and I had over 3,000 comments, and it took me 3 weeks, but I replied to every single comment on that thread. And I mean, if someone's got time for something, I've spent all that time. Absolutely, but I mean, similarly, you know, if people are willing to spend the time to care about something I've created, and I'm able to make a living off of it, I don't want to ignore those people. You know, I find it really humbling. I find it really, really exciting, really, that people care that much. And so, yeah, it's relishing, isn't it? You know, I'm enjoying it. I'm sort of indulging in it a little bit, but you know, maybe that's not going to be scalable in the future. But no, I very much enjoyed that. So I think listening to people is a big thing, you know, and sort of taking them seriously, really, and not just dismissing, oh yeah, cool, whatever, you know. But no, actually, that's a really good point you've made, and actually, I'm going to think about that when I'm coding tonight, you know. And I think people like that, and I think some of them stuck around, and I think there was an addictive element that when people were seeing that an update went live and 20 things they suggested were in that update, and they were one of 10 people that had that happen, just that update alone. I think those people then stuck around because they felt like they were part of the journey, and then they became the biggest praise singers, you know, of the sort of journey of it, and the deepest community members, and it just 100%. Never stopped, really.
No, totally. I think that's really key as well. I think, you know, it's very, very hard to do. I think a couple of things that are super hard to do, which is pace, to keep the pace up, which is, I think, incredibly important, but also to deal, because I mean, I guarantee, I mean, I don't know for certain, but I guarantee that they were not all good positive comments. How did you deal with the negativity that must have happened? How did you stop that from getting to you?
So that is a really good question, actually. And to be honest, I remember we had a period of time where Warsim had 100% positive reviews on Steam, for example, right? I remember that vividly. And every day, right, it was a curse, because every day I'd refresh and be like, oh my God, is it happened yet? You know, the negative review, has it finally happened? And for like months and months and months, it was on 100%. You know, we're not talking a ton of reviews, but one day I looked and it had a negative review, and I remember being almost relieved. I was like, oh, thank God, it's finally happened, you know? And yeah, I mean, at first, some of the comments I'd get, you know, if it was in person, I might have even punched them. Do you know what I mean? Because some of the stuff would be quite barbed. Luckily, it wasn't, and I would look at it initially and be like, bastards, you know. And then 10 minutes later, I'd sit down and have a read of it and go, right, even if they've worded it really badly, there is a nugget of actually valid critique in there. And so what I tried to do and what I learned was absolutely the best method I could really do. And I would call it out if they were being really rude, but I would still say, I can see the validity in what you're saying here, though, and I'll think about it. You know, I'll take that into account. There was a person that left a review where they were shitting on everything, saying, you know, that this element of the game is so stupid and blah 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 blah. But they talked about something that I'd been thinking about myself. So I was like, you know what, I've been thinking about this. Funny enough, so you and me are on the same page on that one. And a week later, I released an update that included a fix to the thing that they complained about. I tagged them in it, and you know what? They changed the review to positive. And I'm not afraid of having conversations with people because I don't feel like I've got anything to hide. So if anyone's critiquing it or they have a comment that they want to make at me about the game, I just address it head on. And shockingly, even sometimes there's been cases on Reddit where people have been really quite rude about something, but I've stayed as honest as I can about it. and they get downvoted to hell, and I get upvoted, and loads of people go, okay, I like what this guy's doing, I'm going to support the game, you know. And it wasn't intentionally done that way, but I've learned that approach is just undeniably always going to be the best one you can do. And you can't fix everything and make it amazing for everyone, but most people are pleased when you consider what they're thinking about. And I don't know, yeah, just take
if
the genuine
someone's
feedback where it
raised
comes.
a review, exactly, and if someone's raised a review, most of those people are doing it because they've done something with the game and they've either enjoyed it, or they thought they would enjoy it and didn't. And if they are genuine in that response, that is incredibly helpful. That being said, so one of the worst reviews I ever had is somebody just decided randomly to say a thing that we had was a virus. This is a virus.
Oh.
That was it. And it wasn't. There was nothing in there that we do. It was just a really vicious, toxic attack for no reason. And the irony is that Google wouldn't let me remove it, even though I could demonstrate we weren't a virus, and B, we hadn't done anything, to that person. It's clearly a vindictive statement, but no, Google won't touch it with a barge pole. In fact, I've seen some
there's always
really kind of poor. Yeah, and I think this is the thing: is that sometimes you just have to take that on the chin.
Absolutely.
Some people will be toxic, and I think your point about responding, about engaging, about calling that person out, saying, "Hey, I made this change for you." That's fantastic. That's like really paying attention. Giving the care back to the community.
No, I appreciate that. But I do agree with what you say. There are some that are just unsolvable. There are going to be some people that are going to project whatever they're feeling in the world onto you because you're what they happen to land on that day. And there's nothing you can do about those few. But I think if you're still taking the nuggets of wisdom and stuff you can deal with out of the reviews or comments that do contain some feedback that is constructive, that's the best you can do, really.
Exactly, and the best you can do. So, I mean, with all this experience that you've had, the incredible success that you've had with this game, and the now taking that forward to the new game, and the transition from being solo dev to running a team, and the kind of the way that you're now engaging with the wider industry, what do you think would be the one thing you'd like a new developer starting out to pay attention to?
Oh God, that's a really good one because it's quite a lot of things that rush to my head, But
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Go for
guess
it.
when you do get your
Give
feedback,
me a smattering of them. Yeah.
all right. Well, I think one of them would be to really consider the growing pains that the systems you're building might have if you don't consider them now. So like there were elements of Warsim, for example, that when I was this close to it really early on and there wasn't that much to it, I was like, this is fine, and later on there were things that had to go through tremendously painful overhauls where a lot of stuff had to be broken and rebuilt because actually I hadn't thought about how that would work later on if I wanted to say do this or that and the other. So it's considering the malleability and the where would you want this to go in the future. That's an important one. And then additionally, how you're getting it out there and showing it to people is an important one. And finally, and to hone on what I've already been saying, really, the feedback that you're getting, like not ignoring that and letting it wither, but instead paying attention and building a sort of community of passion and feedback is vital, really. So there's a lot of lessons I've learned, a lot of things I'd want to impart on people. But a main one is have fun, make something that you actually want to play. Everyone always tells me, why are you making games you want to play? You should make games that other people want to play because that's where the money is. And it's like, no, because you don't know what other people want to play if you don't even know what you want to play yourself. Do you know what I mean? So many people make games that are dog shit and they don't like them themselves. It's like, well, if you don't like them, no one likes them. If I make a game I like, at least one person likes it, and I'm probably I haven't got that unique of a taste. You know what I mean? So,
but I think you've actually doing yourself a disservice by saying that, because if you think about it, everything you've said to me has been, I got this feedback and I incorporated this feedback into the game. And a lot of people who make the game for themselves often are trying to recreate a gameplay experience they once had, and they're not paying attention to the responses that their audience are stating. And I think this is what, for me, I think you should make games for other people. You should make games that you want to play too. Because if you don't want to play it, no one, like you say, no one's going to play it. Because if you don't know it's worth playing. That being said, I very, very rarely play the games that I make. because
I mean, that's
I've
it's
spent
an
so much
interesting
time
point.
making the darn things.
You don't want to touch it because you know how it all works.
But you
No, I totally get that.
exactly. But I mean, like I say, I mean, the best ones are when you go back and you play them again. For example, there. Well, I won't. Some of the board games in particular, I've gone back to and I just thought, oh, actually, that was quite nice. Anyway,
Yeah, cool, isn't it?
let's sort of bring it to a close. So, I thank you so much for taking the time out here. I think there's a whole
My
bunch
pleasure, mate.
of really interesting insights that you kind of being able to share. For example, that it is still possible to get a zeitgeist moment. It is challenging, but there were advantages that come from you having the ability and the space to be able to dedicate the time, but also the timing of COVID meant that there was a peak in people willing to try new things. I think there's still that
Absolutely.
there, but I think you also happen to really play into some really important elements about what make games work, like focusing on something which people could explore and making sure that the game experience was as rewarding inherently as possible, and focusing on the bits of that experience that you could deliver uniquely than other people weren't necessarily doing. I think there's really good, powerful elements and lessons that can be learned from that. And to my mind, anyone out there who's still making games, if you're not paying attention to why you care about that game, why other people care, and responding when they respond to ensure you double down on delivering on that, I think that's the thing that's going to be the biggest engine to anyone's success, listening to the other players. On that note, Huw, if people want to get hold of you or find out more about what you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
I mean, if they find any of the Warsim community spaces, you'll find me on all of them. I reply to pretty much every comment I get on YouTube, on Reddit, on Discord, on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? Anywhere I'm about, shoot me a message. I get a lot of messages anyway from indie devs asking me for tips and stuff. So if you got anything you're struggling with, I'll try my best.
Great stuff. Well, this has been our Game Dev Local podcast. Huw, thank you very much for taking the time with us. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share, follow, whatever it is they do on the particular platform that you're enjoying this on. But also don't forget that we have our own Discord community where you can continue the conversation from there. If you are passionate about making games, it is always inspiring to hear from people who have had those success stories, but also who have that kind of humility and that understanding that this isn't something that's always going to work out for everybody. And we are constantly learning. And by sharing, that's how we make the best chances for us to be able to make the next thing or the next thing or the next thing until we do get that success. And with that in mind, thank you very much. And we'll speak to you again next time.